turn again to Genesis chapter 9. The Book of Beginnings, we've called this series, come towards an end now. Next week will be the last one. But this morning we're looking at the covenant with Noah. The covenant with Noah. Noah, in chapter 8 and verse 18, had stepped out. So he came out of the ark, it says there, together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives. And all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground, and all the birds, everything that moves on the ark, on the earth, came out of the ark, one kind after another. And I put up here a picture of that. It's like they were coming out into a new world, a world that had been washed clean. And there's that rainbow in the background there as well, as if to emphasise that. It's like they're starting out all over again. As if we've gone back to Genesis chapter 1 almost, isn't it? Actually, when you read this section of Scripture, 3 times the command, be fruitful and multiply, appears. The same command was given in chapter 1 of Genesis, before the fall, before the curse, to remind us that we actually are starting again here. It's a brand new start. Everything's been wiped out. All life has disappeared, apart from those a few people and the animals that stepped out onto the dry grounds. I wonder if you wish you were there yourself, a little bit, able to start all over again. One of the dreams of the human race is to start again like this, isn't it? To go back to the beginning and to have a brand new start. I've mentioned before the song by Joni Mitchell, Woodstock. Oh, we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. That's the dream, isn't it, of those hippies in that period of the 1960s. Stephen Hawking wanted to colonise space and begin again there, didn't he? And see the human race start out there afresh on a new planet. When I look at that picture, also, do you know what it reminds me of? The Starship Enterprise in the background there is the Ark, and that is Captain Kirk and his crew who's been beamed down to a new planet. To explore new life and new civilizations. Remember that phrase at the beginning of Star Trek? It's like that, isn't it? And that's the dream, I think, of Star Trek as well, isn't it? To explore these new areas and to colonise new parts that haven't yet received life and to bring life to them. A great human dream. A human dream for those who aren't Christians as well. There is, of course, for Christians, a big difference. Because though Noah enters out into this new world, as it appears, sin has not gone away. Sin has entered the world and has not been washed away. Yes, wrath has been delivered, but the new world, of course, is soon going to go the same way as the old world. And God knew that as well, didn't he? Chapter 8 and verse 21. Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though God knows every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood. That hasn't changed. And we see that, of course, in this chapter, don't we, when Noah gets drunk. This unseemly episode where he is unclothed and where his son Ham sees in that state and then goes and tells his brothers, perhaps with some sort of grin on his face maybe. And then we have a curse that follows from Noah on his youngest son and on his progeny. And then we hear about Noah's death. Does that remind you of anything? There's an echo there of Genesis 3, of the behaviour of man, and then of the curse, and then of death, Noah's death at the end. It's a rerun, isn't it, of what happened in Genesis 3. The Lord knows what is going to happen in this new world, and yet he still persists with us. So what we have here, therefore, in this next chapter, is how God deals with this broken, fallen world that he has wiped clean through the floods. Here we have, therefore, an account of his how he's going to regulate life, how life is going to continue on earth after the flood, in light of the fact that actually we are still sinful creatures and likely to reproduce the same sins that happened before the flood as well. This is the covenant that God is making. The covenant is God's regulating of this world, his agreement with himself as to how he's going to operate in this world. And I mentioned a week or two ago, was it last week or the week before? Well, not last week, but before Jonathan Worsley was here, that the word covenant is a new word in Genesis. It first appears in chapter 6, when God establishes his covenant with Noah. And this is like an expansion of that, a further explanation of what that covenant involves. A very important word for us to get our heads around this morning, as well as a couple of weeks ago. A covenant is God's promise. It's a promise he makes almost to himself as much as to us. It's as if God is the landlord. He is the owner of this. He's the creator of this earth. He is the landlord of this earth, and we are his tenants. And he says, this is the agreement I'm going to have with you, how I'm going to run this earth with you. It's not a contract. If you were going to rent a property from a landlord today, you'd negotiate the terms. And you might ask for a little bit less on the rent, and perhaps a little bit more, please my cat come in as well, my dog as well, and you negotiate a contract. This is not a contract. A covenant is something that God lays down. It's his promise, it's his commitment to us. But we don't negotiate in any way with him at all. Unlike a contract. God's covenant to us is this. That he's going to provide us with life on earth. He has agreed with himself not to again bring another flood. And he's going to give us other instructions as well, as we'll see in the rest of this chapter. Our job as human beings is to understand this contract, this covenant, not contract, this covenant, and to act according to it, to understand it and work with it, to go with the grain, if you like, of God's purposes on this earth. God's covenant with us. So we see first of all in this covenant the promise of continuing life. Verse 11, the second part of verse 11. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth, promises God. Of course, this doesn't mean there won't be natural disasters. We know full well that there will be floods and storms, earthquakes in various places, avalanches. We've seen those perhaps over the last week or two in some of the areas where people go for winter skiing. And of course, in the summer we've seen some awful wildfires, haven't we? That have destroyed property and life. But until Jesus Christ returns, the world and human and animal life will continue. God has promised. And I hope that frees us, if we are in any way subject to this, from the anxiety that many people feel about this planet and about its future. There are films made, disaster movies made, about how an asteroid will come and hit the Earth at some point and wipe out all life from it. And some people are afraid of that. Some people see films about freak weather conditions that will cause huge waves to sweep over whole continents and wipe them out. And then there are those also who watch films about alien invaders who will come and destroy the human race. And many people do have anxieties about these things. Or indeed about climate change, and how that will destroy life on Earth. We shouldn't be subject to those anxieties, because God has promised that life will continue on Earth. There will be no destruction of this earth until Christ comes. But nor should it make us complacent about our environment. We as human beings are harming this planet. We're told that the earth is groaning under the weight of sin, and we are the people who have brought sin into this world. We should be caring as Christians about the CO2 levels, about deforestation, about the fumes and the pollution, about the fly tipping and the litter. We should be caring for creation, because we know it is not just here randomly. It is God's beautiful creation. And people who harm it are harming the work of our Creator and our Redeemer. Because we know who made it, we should care for it more than any other group of people on this planet. But we should also be confident that it won't end before the time appointed for it by our God. Secondly, there is a new relationship with nature. Back in chapter 1, God had spoken to Adam and Eve and said, command them to rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the face of the earth. We, humankind, were given dominion over the natural world. We were to be beneficent viceroys, those who ruled this planet on God's behalf and ruled it for good, to be a blessing to it. And indeed, we were also given every seed-bearing plant and every seed-bearing fruit tree for food as well. God provided for us. At that time, there was to be no meat to be eaten. But now look at verse 2. It says there, the fear and dread of you will fall upon all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the air and upon every creature that moves on the ground and upon all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hands. Fear and dread now is the relationship between us and the animal kingdom. Have you ever seen young children, perhaps in the Strand here in Exmouth, when they try to go approach a seagull or a pigeon? And they want to pick it up perhaps and stroke it, but the birds run away, don't they? Or fly away. Mm-hmm. Fear and dread comes over them. From the very beginning, the animal kingdom fears and dreads us. They're not taught that or anything particularly. Somehow it's inherent in them, isn't it? And we see in verse 3 also that meat is back on the menu. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you, just as I gave you the green plants, now I give you every living thing as well. Now, if you're a Christian vegetarian, and you're a vegetarian from conscience, this, of course, is a problem for you, isn't it? And it is perhaps for others of us as well. We wonder why it is that animals have to die so that we can eat. And I think here we need to be clear that we're talking about God's permissive will rather than his perfect will. And I want to illustrate that by something that Jesus said. When he was approached by the Pharisees, they said to Jesus, is it lawful to divorce your wife for any and every reason? And Jesus referred them to Genesis. He says, no, it's not God's purpose. Genesis chapter 2 makes it very clear that God's purpose was for man and woman to be joined together. And what God has joined together, let man not separate. So the Pharisees were confused at that point. And they said, well, why did Moses command? Moses was God's man. And he commanded that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce. They couldn't understand why, if Jesus is saying, well, divorce isn't God's will, why is Moses here commanding to give a certificate of divorce? And Jesus, of course, answered, well, he said, it was not this way from the beginning. Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. Now, can you see the parallel here with Genesis chapter 9? Because God's permissive will allows things that his perfect will does not actually wish to see in this world. God doesn't take any delight in animals being killed for our delectation so that we can eat them. But that is his permissive will. We are permitted to do it. In the perfect creation that is coming, it will not happen like that. We won't be eating meat in heaven. But in the meantime, his permissive will allows that to happen, as we see here. Just as he allows divorce, it is not part of his perfect will. And it's important to distinguish between those two things. God, if you like, and this is a word I use with great trepidation, God is compromising here, if you like. He's making allowances for us. He has to, if he's going to allow this earth to continue and life to continue, without judging it before the appointed time. He recognises that it's not going to be a perfect world. And he's not going to destroy us either, which he could do, and he's entitled to do. And here is the answer. His character is such that he is faithful to his promises. And his mercy triumphs over judgment. Mercy, something that we find in the New Testament. Mercy triumphs over judgments. So though God is entitled to judge and one day will judge, yet his mercy within him says, hold on, not yet. I want to see these people come to faith. I want to have them reconciled. We were hearing earlier from Annette about peace. I want to see peace break out between mankind and myself. And he has a plan, as we know, that's going to reach its fulfillment when Christ comes. But in the meantime, he tolerates the eating of meat. He accepts it. And he tolerates divorce. It's not part of his perfect will. But he's a God in whom mercy triumphs over judgment. There is one big caveat to this permission to kill and to eat meat, and that is the restriction regarding blood we find in verses 4 to 6. Verse 4, you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood in it. This is, again, we talk about Genesis being the book of beginnings. This is the first time we hear about this ban on eating blood. And it will continue right through the Bible. The Old Testament, we find it also in the New Testament as well. In the book of Acts, for instance, where even the New Testament church is commanded to hold back from eating blood. Why is this? Why is it so important that we don't eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it? Well, in Leviticus, the third book of the Bible, we find there that there is a considerable number of laws that are given to Israel that explain the importance of sacrifice and particularly of the offering of blood. God explains to Moses and to Moses, the Israelites, that the life of every animal is in its blood. And we know, of course, don't we, that the blood courses around our body and it takes oxygen and nutrients to every cell in our body. We live because we can breathe, and the breath goes into our lungs, and from our lungs into the blood, and the blood is rushing around our bodies, even now, isn't it? Giving us life. If our blood congealed from among us in our bodies, we would all die. The life is in the blood, says God in Leviticus. It is precious, isn't it? Our blood is precious. It's our lifeblood, literally. Without it, we would die. And therefore, God has taken blood, if you like, as the most precious thing that we have, and gives it to us and say, this is so precious, I want to use it, I want you to use it as a sacrifice. It is the one thing that will make peace between me and you, is the sacrifice of blood. So look at chapter 8 and verse 20. When Noah came out of the ark and was altered to the Lord, and taken some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. He killed those animals. Their blood was spilled because it was an offering to God. And when God looked on the blood, he smelled the pleasing aroma of the burnt offerings and said in his heart, never again will I curse. It's the blood that he looks upon that causes him to respond in a positive way towards what Noah has done. If you like, sacrifice and blood mark the new mode of relationship between God and man henceforth. At this stage, it's the blood of animals that is precious. But if the blood of animals is precious, how much more so is the blood of human life? And in these verses here, the main emphasis is actually on the sanctity and the importance of human life in the verses that follow. So verse 5, and for your lifeblood, he says, for the human lifeblood, I will surely demand an accounting. People have to answer for taking human life, for shedding blood. I will demand an accounting for every animal, but even an animal that's actually human and kills it has to give an account for that. And from each man too, I will demand an accounting for the life of his fellow man. And then we have verse 6. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made man. A rehearsal again of what we find in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26. That we are made in God's image and that human life is especially precious to him. Now I said a couple of weeks ago that actually we have no rights before God. When God sends the flood, he's entitled to wipe out all human life from this earth. We are his creation. We have rebelled against him. We have become enemies of God. He's entitled to destroy his enemies. But we've seen his mercy given to Noah. And we still, as Noah emerges from the ark, we still bear his image. For all our sin, all the faults that lie in us, we are still image bearers of God. And every human being is precious in his sight. Now, those who campaign for human rights, you find the most secular humanists are doing this as well as Christians and many others, but those who campaign for human rights are actually affirming this point, aren't they? They may deny God, but you have to ask them, well, why is it that human life is so sacred? Why do we have things like human rights? Why is there a European Court of Human Rights? not a European Court of Animal Rights? Why is it that human beings, if we're just evolved creatures, if we're just a slight advance on the ants or the antelope, why is it that we have rights and they don't? We're just a few million years further on in our development, but there's no essential difference in terms of where we came from. So actually, when we talk about human rights, when anyone talks about human rights, we're affirming the fact that we have rights because we are made in God's image. That is the only satisfactory explanation for the whole concept of human rights, that we are made in God's image and therefore especially precious to Him. And of course that has huge implications, doesn't it, for the way we approach things like infanticide. Why we are opposed to that, why in the ancient world Christians were opposed to that, which is the regular practice of the Greeks and the Romans, to expose babies if they didn't want them. Why we're opposed to abortion and assisted dying. Why we're opposed to warmongers, those who launch unjust, selfish, greedy wars against their neighbours. All of those people, we would say, are guilty of murder, of taking human life, or causing human life to be taken. And that is why verse 6, in effect, is God sanctioning capital punishment. Now, in the Old Testament, later on we'll see, or you maybe know yourselves in the Old Testament, that it was the role of the people of Israel to actually stone people who committed certain offences. Among them was murder. Particularly, there was someone called the Avenger of Blood. The Avenger of Blood was someone who was a relative or someone who had been murdered, and the Avenger of Blood was entitled to take the life of the murderer, if that murderer was shown to be guilty. Today, this is the role of the state. It has taken on that particular role to administer justice and to restrain evil. When you think back in the book of Genesis, even now, we've got the example of Cain. Cain murdered his brother, Abel, and went unpunished, didn't he? Lamech boasted, I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. He boasted about it. He murdered someone. And he got away with it. Because there was no law at that time concerning this matter. It was wrong, it was evil, it was wicked. Henceforth, that sort of evil, that sort of wickedness will be restrained by this particular law here. That's why Paul says this in Romans, and I think he's thinking here of this passage in, among others, in Genesis 9. The one in authority is God's servant, he says, to do you good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant. The word there is deacon. He's like someone that God has appointed in a role of authority in the state. An agent of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. So let's recognise that and realise that the reason why human rights are important is because we are made in the image of God, and to infringe those is a very serious matter, and God demands an accounting. So let's draw these together then with some conclusions. What should we understand from this passage this morning? First of all, this: the Noahic covenant is the covenant that the whole world today lives under. Everyone, whether they are aware of it or not, exists because of this covenant that God has made to spare the earth. Now, for a while, it is true, God separated the Jews. Later on in chapter 11 and chapter 12 of Genesis, we'll read about how God began the process of separating the Jews from the rest of the world, and they existed lived under the Abrahamic and Mosaic covenants. The Old Testament, the Old Covenant as we call it. But even those covenants with Abraham and Moses were only temporary, preparing the way for the new covenant that Jesus Christ initiated on the cross at Calvary. A new covenant that embraces Jews and Gentiles, brings them back together again. And when Christ returns, of course, he'll bring to completion the new covenant that he inaugurated at Calvary. There'll be no more permissive will, only God's perfect will in the world to come when he returns, and that new covenant is brought to its completion. In the meantime, he's given us the sign of this covenant by which we live and work and breathe and move on this earth. Have a look at verses 12 to 13 of chapter 9. God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you. a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Actually, the word there is not rainbow. Some of you may know that there's no word for that. So the word is simply bow. It's the same word you use as you would in bow and arrow, a hunting bow, if you like. It's almost as if, some people have said this, it's almost as if God has taken his hunting bow and hung it up in the clouds. Said, right, I've finished with that now, and I want it to be there now as a sign of peace rather than a sign of war. That's possible, but I think more likely it's simply there as a sign of hope, a symbol of hope. Did any of you see the rainbow? I saw one on Friday in Exmouth. Friday afternoon, I think it was. Friday, or was it around lunchtime? A beautiful rainbow. From where I was looking, it was over Budley Salston, over the woods there. But I'm sure if I'd got to find it, I wouldn't have found it there. It'd been further on still. But rainbows are beautiful, aren't they? When you look at them, you see all those lovely colours. And they're all, aren't they, separated out so we can recognise them. And they're in the shape, aren't they, of a beautiful arc as well. Do you ever wonder about why it is the laws of physics are such that when a rainbow appears, it's in a perfect arc, mathematically precise? Why is that the case? Does it need to be like that? We know that our God has made it such, don't we? But when you think about a rainbow, what is it? It's a mixture of two things. It's water and light, isn't it, coming together? And the light is refracted through the water. The water, of course, reminds us of the flood, doesn't it? And of judgment. And yet, as the light strikes the water, there is this beautiful creation of a rainbow. Something beautiful happens when wrath meets mercy, when light meets water. Something beautiful emerges at that point. So, in one sense, life remains as it was before the flood. An English philosopher called Thomas Hobbes, who lived in the 17th century, described human life like this. He wasn't a believer. The life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That's a summary of human life. For the Christian, that is true. But also there is hope amid the despair of that particular sentence. That hope is made real when the one greater than Noah comes to rescue us from the greater wrath that will one day surely engulf this heaven and earth when Christ comes again and brings about his new creation. This earth will disappear forever. So there is hope in the rainbow. When we look at the rainbow, when you see next time you see a rainbow, think of that. Think of that of wrath meeting mercy. And think of hope lying in that coming together of water and light. So lastly, what should we do about this? How should we react to this? Well, the Christian lives under two covenants. I mentioned earlier the Noahic covenant, but of course we live under the Christ covenant as well. We know that we are those who have received the hope that God has put in us, the Holy Spirit, as the deposit of that world that is to come. We are those, like Noah, who have been given favour by God. And we've got to work out our salvation now, as it says in Philippians. As Paul says to the Philippian Christians, you are living under the Noahic covenant, but you're also under Christ's covenant. So work out what it means. Work out your salvation, he says, with fear and trembling. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace. Be peacemakers with everyone. Don't take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. Don't get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Holy Spirit. These are the sort of things we should be doing as Christians to work out our salvation, what it means to live under these two covenants together at this time. We see that we can make bad choices. Noah had been saved, hadn't he, from the flood. And he emerged from the ark. And then he planted a vineyard. And he got drunk. And he was unclothed in his tent. He made some bad choices. He got drunk on wine. We're told not to. Ham, his son, went in and viewed him there and put him out and giggled and told his brothers about it as well. We see lewdness and the beginnings perhaps of that road to debauchery that Paul speaks about. Don't go down that route. Work out your salvation. Be a model citizen under the Noahic covenant. Pay your taxes. I love it when Peter comes to Jesus and says, or someone says to Peter, why doesn't your teacher, why doesn't your rabbi pay the taxes? And Peter comes to Jesus and says, look, I've been told to pay my taxes. What are we going to do? And Jesus told him to go to that fish and open its mouth, and inside is a 2 drachma coin. He said, that's for your tax and mine, Peter. Go give it to him. Jesus himself made sure that the authorities were given their due taxes. Make sure we do the same thing as well. Pray for our government. Pray for President Trump. Pray for the Iranians. Pray for the nations of this world. We'll look at those again next week when we come to look at our final one in Genesis. Pray for the police, whose job it is to enforce law and order, to restrain evil, to bring wrongdoers to account, that murderers and others are brought to account and brought before the law and given appropriate sentences. We don't have to execute. I do believe that the state has permission to do that from these verses, but it is not mandatory. But people are called to account for their crimes. We should be praying for our police and our justice system in this country. So there's so much strain at the moment, because we know why it's there. We know what happens, the absolute anarchy and the violence that sprays out if it is not restrained. So be a good citizen. Work out your salvation under God's hand with fear and trembling, knowing you've been saved for a purpose, and knowing you live in a temporary time before Christ comes again. But finally, continue to dream. When I began, I spoke about that great human dream of the new worlds, of Captain Kirk and his fellow pioneers stepping out into a brave new planet and exploring a brave new worlds. But we are, as Christians, are to continue to dream. You know, when the Holy Spirit comes at Pentecost, Peter quotes from the book of Joel, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people, on all flesh. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, your old men, here we are, old men, we will dream dreams. If you're an old man this morning, you should be dreaming dreams about the world to come, about what God is doing among us. One day, his permissive will give way to his perfect will. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together. And a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the hole of the cobra. And the young child put his hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. Is that your dream? It's one of mine.